Hello viewers, and welcome to another edition of our women's program Karampe. Well, the country India is rich and abundant in its culture, in its tradition, in its language, in its literature, in its music. The Northeast also is endowed with such blessings. We can take of several names, in fact. Bhupen Hazarika is one such personality the Northeast knows. But then when we come to the state of Meghalaya, we have several greats also who have done tremendous jobs, brought tremendous accolades for the state and is still doing the same. One such name that I can take right now is Neil Nonkandri, well, and his most famous, the Shillong Chamber Choir. And talking in the same breath, there is another name which is so famous and which you have also heard is Kong Pauline Warjri. Well, Kong Pauline Warjri also has a choir of her own called the Aroha Choir and the Aroha Children's Choir. She is a composer, an arranger, a music educationist, as well as a singer, a pianist, and etc. etc. Well, we are right now in her house, in her very cozy, beautiful house here in Shillong. And this is a conversation that we are going to have with Kong Pauline Warjri, all about her journey into music, her contributions, especially in honing these little children to these choirs that she has, and what performance do they perform, especially that we have witnessed so many times, both nationally, internationally. So there's so much to talk about, so much to bring out from Kong Pauline Warjri, and I hope you will be here in this conversation that I am so lucky to be in this home and to take this interview. So welcome to this program and a very warm welcome to you, Kong Pauline Warjri. It's a pleasure, it's my absolute honor to come to your home and to be able to be in person with you and to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for coming.
You know, you, Kong Pauline, belong to a music family, a musical family. Of course, you also belong to a very illustrious political family as well. I mean, we know Scott Lingdor. I was so fortunate to interview him so many times, I remember earlier. And he was one personality who would never say a no. Whenever we would request him to be a part of our panel discussion or an interview, he was always there. Apart from that, you have this very illustrious brother of yours, and of course, as I said, and the fact that you come from this both background, a political background, a musical background, and you decided to choose music. Tell us a little bit, if I can rewind your memory, take you back into those days. Was music always that you wished to do?
Well, I grew up with a piano in the living room because my parents were not in Shillong at that time. The first 5 years in Shillong, my grandfather had this piano which he bought for my aunts actually, and I remember just picking up tunes and learning how to play the favorites from The Sound of Music. So that's how I came to play the piano. They call it playing by ear.
Okay.
And it was only when I turned 8 that my parents requested for me to start learning how to read in school. And I did, but I didn't like classical music, perhaps because I found it boring. And but I'm glad for the background because it taught me how to read, and I didn't have a teacher until after I was 14.
Okay.
And the rest of the journey has been uphill. I never really understood the gift until I was much older. And I would continue with choirs even after I had stopped formal lessons. And then I realized that what interested me the most was music making in a group.
Okay.
So which is why I chose to have a choir. And you know, I often told myself, if I had been a strings player, I would have maybe started an orchestra.
Wow.
But that was not to be. And unfortunately, I don't play any of these other instruments. And so my brother and I worked with the human voice. And we realized that piano playing is really quite an isolated affair.
Right.
So it is much better for me to be an accompanist and to work with a group of singers.
Right.
And so that's how I, you know, it was not of my own choosing. It's just that one thing led to another.
The other,
yes.
yeah. And talking about piano, you are a pass out from Loreto Convent.
That's right.
An institution, because even I am a pass out from that. And I remember there was a piano in our hall, in our school hall, and our respective sisters would always be playing on it. And our assembly sessions often would have, you know, a song or a group song or a prayer service accompanied with the piano. So right from those days, because I'm sure that also must have played a little role in your early school days?
Not a little role, but it played a big role. I remember when I was in class 4, a teacher, my class teacher, had come to visit, and she realized that I could play the piano. So when we went back to school, she announced that here's a girl who can play any tune that she hears. So the nuns would often ask me to play for assembly, and whenever we had choir, they would ask me to pick out who was singing flat or sharp.
Okay.
So that gave me a lot of training, and I always played at assemblies. And so that was a very huge beginning for me.
Right,
yeah.
Right. I mean, that piano is still there.
It's still there.
It's still there, because I remember you in 2009 when we celebrated our centenary year.
That's right, yes.
You had taught us, the past pupils, alumni, actually.
That's right. Right? Yes.
And I still remember some of us couldn't pitch our voice to that level, I mean, at this stage of our lives, but you ensured, you tried your best that, you know, each of us could at least pitch to some extent.
Oh, that was
And we
fun.
did sing a beautiful song, which you taught all of us.
That's right.
Wonderful. All right, now coming back, you know, because you in 2007, you were in South India, in Karnataka.
That's right, yes.
And thereafter you came and you started these 2 choirs.
Right.
Yes. What prompted you really to work? I mean, was it the need that you need to hone talents here? Because as I said right in my introduction, there's plenty of talent. I mean, be it in sports, be it in, you know, guitar is almost in, you know, everybody knows how to strum the guitar. Singing, they do so well. You know, the dance forms, everything that you, in the arts form, you know, in the complete art forms. So did you also consciously think that you needed to nurture some of these talents that are in abundance here in the state?
Yeah, well, there's that saying, you know, those who can do and those who can't teach. And I found that more than being a solo player, I was a better teacher.
Right.
So I had taught in an international school, and the school gave me free rein on many things. They encouraged creative teaching, and one of the things that I did was revive the jazz band.
Okay.
So I taught my group of students, and you know, all of them could read, and some who couldn't read could pick up things by ear. So, and I was very fortunate to have had a colleague who was a professional saxophone player. So I learned a lot of things from him, and as well as other people who were volunteering as musicians then. So that was a big year for me. And the things that I learned as a teacher, I thought I had to continue, because I saw that music could bring people together.
Right.
And we could raise funds for many a worthy cause. We could use music as an awareness, you know, against drugs or poverty or health issues, and I found that very, very useful. And so when I left Kodi, the international school in Kodaikanal, and my husband's posting was in Bangalore, I decided to start a choir because I didn't know how long we would live there. So I floated the idea around, and a lot of young people joined the choir. And I found that I could get people from many communities. And at that point of time, I had students who were from Manipur, and it was a time when there was a lot of ethnic conflict.
Okay.
But in the choir, you couldn't smell any of that. And I thought, here is music, is such a powerful tool. You came in as musicians, and you didn't bring in any of your ethnicities, you know, that were negative. And this choir that I had was really versatile.
Right.
At first they found it very daunting to pick up the things that I was trying to teach them, but through persistence, within 3 months we were able to tour. So in that short time we raised funds for poor cancer patients in Vellore, we raised funds for hospitals, and then for street children in Chennai, in a very short time. So and the choir members would later testify that those are the best years of their life.
Oh, wonderful.
And I think it helped their personalities to grow, and that batch is now all over the world. Many have left for Australia, for the States. I have one who works for the BBC, and they all say that those were the formative years of their
How
life.
wonderful. So what I understand is that, you know, music plays a great leveler.
Right.
It doesn't see who's rich, who's poor,
No.
who's, you know, fat, who's thin.
No, nothing
it,
at all.
it brings everybody together, and I'm sure that you also, and I read it somewhere, that you believe that music also heals.
That's right.
Music brings people together. It invigorates in us, you know, our traditions, our values, our cultures, which we often sometimes tend to forget, you know,
Yes.
in the midst of all this intrusion that we have of westernization,
That's right. Yes.
modernization, consumerism,
Right.
right? It's taking away so much of our values sometimes, I feel.
That's
Do you
right.
agree to that?
Yes,
And
yes,
therefore
absolutely.
music also heals. And as you said, there are, you know, the youth of today suffer. They have certain anxiety issues, some nervousness, some problems of not fitting in. But I think music does help them to heal as well.
Yes, yes, because music can bring you back to your roots. The call that I had to go back to my roots actually began in a small little mountain village in Switzerland.
Okay.
I was attending a conference called Faith and the Arts,
Okay.
and it was there that I really had to delve deep into the question of who I was, which culture do I belong to. And you know, in a post-colonial world where one was still holding on to colonial values, which can be good, can be bad. Well, you know, you're a Loreto girl, I'm a Loreto girl. The values that we learned in school they prepare us for the world.
Yes.
You know, we can survive anywhere, any country, any culture. So that was the good part of it. So here I was with a group of musicians from more than 32 nations, and all bringing in their own culture. And I was very westernized in that sense. You know, I could fit in with whatever music that was played, but when it came to music from my own culture, I had to ask myself, what is my ethnicity here? So it was when I came back, I realized that all the books that I had read in school could now help me form an identity.
Okay.
You know, the Khasi books that I'd read, So Tham, Kaphawar. So it was in 2000 that my brother, who was living in England at that time, asked me, in fact, I had gone to England for a workshop, and he said, why don't we start a choir? And funnily enough, that workshop that I went to was a jazz workshop. And the man who was running it said that his love was choirs as well. And he had a choir where he was training people to not look at sheet music.
Okay.
And I sat and listened to that, and I was thinking to myself, and here I am planning to do the exact opposite. I'm going to go back to Shillong, and I'm going to train people how to read music. So between my brother and myself, I was living in Bangalore at that time. He said, we'll audition and we will start a choir and we will see how many people are interested in learning how to read. And of course, I think it was almost 1,000 people who responded. I wasn't there that time, but it was a very good friend of ours, Christine Iralo, who was there with my brother, and the auditioned people. And that's how our journey started into getting back to our roots. And when the choir was ready, I was called in to write a few songs for them, and I remember arranging Meiba Eight Junga.
Okay.
And it went down very well. And in those days, not very many people were willing to sing in the vernacular, because in school you're encouraged to sing in English and do English songs. But here we were trying to revive the tradition. And then after that, I remember reading about our language being in danger of extinction. So I thought I should start writing. But I wasn't very confident that I knew the language well enough, so I began to use scripture. And then I taught myself the nuances, and I listened a little more carefully, and then I began to appreciate my language and my heritage.
Right. All right, so ma'am, it is important, isn't it, to hold on to one's culture, to one's identity, because that is our identity.
That's
you know, our tradition is the values that has come from the generations bygones, is something that we need to hold on to. Now, coming back to the Aroha choir once again, you know, you said that when you first started it, there were a deluge of so many, want to be like singers and who wanted to be part of the choir. And that shows the kind of interest, and that shows the kind of talent that is here. And then you formed the group, of course, and now you are singing the jazz, the blues, the gospel, folk also.
That's right.
And then you have different levels. I'm not much of a singer, ma'am, so I'll not be able to tell you. But then there are some high notes, some people who, a group who sings on a higher notes, sopranos, you call them.
That's
some
right.
on the lower notes, altos, etc. How do you blend all that, and how do you identify who is into which kind of singing?
Well, when they come for an audition, I ask them to either send a song on WhatsApp, or better still, they do a live audition, and then I test them on their range. So at the first setting, you sort of establish who's an alto or soprano and what their range is.
Right.
And it's not very difficult to categorize
because in
them.
any case you have that very keen ear.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And how about knowing an instrument? Because do most of your these choir members also know to play the piano, or is it compulsory? Should they know any instrument too?
I was coming to that. Now the challenge for me in starting a choir, not only for me but for my brother as well, was to educate people from scratch. And that is something directors in the West, they don't have to grapple with that. But for us who are sort of on breaking ground, we had to start from scratch. So I started a program where you come for singing once a week, and then you learn an instrument, be it the guitar or the piano. The preferred instrument, of course, is the piano because of the broad range that it has. In fact, most composers start off on the piano, and they to reach a certain level, because when you orchestrate, when you write for choirs, the piano is the base instrument for that. So that is what I did with the second batch. The first batch were already quite old. I mean old as in they were mature, they were adults. So some had the time and the knack for picking up a second instrument, but it was with the second batch that I caught very young. So each one of them are quite advanced. So they either play the guitar or the piano or both, and they are that is important as well. Very,
it is part
very important.
of it. And how important is discipline? Are you a really hard taskmaster? You ensure that they practice?
Yes,
they have to be disciplined.
They have to be disciplined. I am, and it's about managing your time. So there have been times when we are touring, especially when there were children. We'd be touring because it's on a weekend, and I'm sitting at the airport and making sure they're doing their geography or their history, so that when they get back on the Monday, they will still pass their tests. And even for the international competition that we did, and people were in between school exams and tests, and I had quite a tussle with one or two principals, although most of them sent their children with their blessings. But I had a tussle with one or two, you know, saying what will happen to their studies. But the thing is, I say you have to look at the broad part of education. This is part of their education.
Yeah, education. Plus, they were interested in that, and it says that a child, you should do what interests you, what passion you have in the long run.
Yes.
Yeah. And talking about touring, you have gone to a number of places. You have won awards in international arenas also. What has been the experience like, if you could share with us?
Well, you know, for anyone interested, I actually wrote a blog which was published by the Serenade magazine based in Bombay. And there we tell the story of our struggles, because with the chaperones and all the students going, we had to raise, you know, 500 crore, you know, for your stay. So it was the parents who actually raised their own funds. And we had food fests. Then we started a public campaign, and so that's how we raised funds. And when we arrived in Wales, in fact, before we left, 2 of our singers were rejected. Their visas were rejected because of some technical. That was a huge blow, because the girl who could sing the highest note couldn't go with us. So we left very downhearted with these 2 children who couldn't go. It was the most heartbreaking moment. And then the struggles, we had never been in an international competition, and it was very stiff because the best choirs were competing. And I'm glad we didn't know too much, because otherwise we would have had cold feet. We realized in the a cappella category, we were up against the winners of the previous years, the Welsh choir, and then there were the San Francisco men's choir, which is ranked 18th in the world. And here I had these 11-year-olds to 22-year-olds. Anyway, they say ignorance is bliss. Anyway, so when we won that competition, I mean, I could hardly believe it. So that sort of confirmed that I was doing the right thing. Even though we climbed mountains to make that happen. And of course it didn't happen with just one person. There were so many people who supported us.
Right. And talking about a cappella singing, that is the highest form, you could say, because you know you don't use any music. And all your flaws can be heard, because if just one note goes off, you can, you know, one person can direct the choir in the wrong direction. So that was a very heartening thing. All right. Now, ma'am, as I said right in the beginning, that you come from a musical family, because Banil Nonkandri, whom we lost in a very tragic manner and very unexpectedly, is a big loss, isn't it, ma'am? In the music scene of the country, I dare say. Because this is a choir group that is literally respected, loved, and where not have they performed, the Shillong Chamber Choir. I know I might be touching a raw nerve here. How much is he missed, ma'am? Because we miss him very, very dearly.
There is no closure yet for me. For the choir, they've come to terms with it, and they're very brave. They've carried on his legacy. There is much healing. For me, I cannot listen to Mozart and Chopin without remembering him and feeling deep sorrow in my heart. But at the same time, I rejoice for all the times that he was able to do what he has been able to do. To bring communities not only in India but around the world, to bring them together is no mean feat. And the discipline that he's instilled in the choir, the training that he's given them, he's given them such a firm foundation, they're able to continue without him and even to greater heights.
Absolutely, and the legacy of Banil Nonkandri will remain, I guess, and with the Shillong Chamber Choir still holding on to that, because they are still performing. In fact, they are
very much so.
Yes, they are still performing, and they are quite independent now. on their own. What is it lacking here, ma'am? Because as I say, there's so much of talent here in the state. What more needs to be done to hone these talents, to encourage them, for them to find a place so that they can showcase their talent? You are here, you're grooming them, but don't they feel sometimes a little more needs to be done for them?
Yeah. You know, the answer is surprisingly very, very simple. I just need a few people in government to just channel the money and the support in the right direction.
Right.
I've been saying this for years, and you know, at the risk of sounding too familiar, you know, it's the same refrain. Channel your money into training teachers. Channel your money into education at the primary level. I can't tell you how much good that is going to do. Now, what policy makers have to grapple with is our class sizes.
Okay.
You can't replicate what you're doing in the West to here.
No.
And for music education, it can't continue even in the Indian tradition where you have the guru,
Shiksha Parampara. Yeah.
That is one-to-one. So you've got to take the Western model where music is a great leveler, and then you have to adapt the means and find people, I dare say, find people like me who are ready to work, because I've written textbooks that are meant for the Indian school. You can't take Western books and you may do it maybe to a few good schools that
understands also, right?
Or that have the money.
Yeah.
But how are you going to educate musically inclined children in the districts? You've got to adapt it to their level.
Right.
So I've applied for many grants. Unfortunately, I've been turned down numerous times. What you need to do is be aware of the class sizes, start teaching them vocal music, how to read, because you're not going to be able to teach one-to-one lessons as yet. Then fund a program that will train teachers, put it into the embossed level, and then have one-to-one lessons for those who are capable, but the logistics are you'll have to provide instruments to these deserving candidates. So I've done a detailed DPR, which was sadly rejected, but if anyone in government will take that up, if we have a 5-year plan, you will see Meghalaya leading the way for the rest of the country.
Right. And I think the same applies even for our traditional music here too.
The same model.
The same model. Because you know, we have traditional singing instruments also. I believe so many singers tells me that they cannot find, there's nobody making those traditional instruments. So if that also could be channelized in a more organized manner, you know, the music scene would be more thriving and vibrant than what it is right now.
The industry needs to grow, so it can all grow under this umbrella.
And people like you are there, you know, to channelize that energy.
Before I become too old.
You still look wonderful, ma'am. So it's been a pleasure, but then as we are almost winding up this program, what is the kind of little message maybe you would like to give to all of your students, because this program is going to be watched, let me tell you. You know, we go into the YouTube channel also, it's going to be watched. So what kind of a little, you know, words of wisdom you would like to share to the young ones of how they can embrace music and make it a part of their everyday life?
Well, if a student loves music, what I would encourage you to do is find a good teacher. Divide your time so that you practice every day. A lot of people come to me and they think that they will become good enough to play or to perform after 3 lessons or after 3 months. You know, music is one of the hardest crafts.
Right.
I'm still learning at this age. So you've got to persist. And I want to say that it is really 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you stick at it, I've seen a lot of students who are very talented and whose talent has come to nothing. On the other hand, I've seen students whom I thought mistakenly, and I've told their parents, I've said to one or two, look, your daughter or your son doesn't seem to have much talent, but they seem to be quite interested, and after 5 years I've changed my mind because they've gone on ahead. And then of course there are those few students who are very talented and who are also very disciplined and who are making it in the music world.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think this is very, very important what you said, and it goes as a message to the parents too, because parents put their words on their children and they think overnight or after a few months their children should be able to sing very well and perform very well.
Yes.
The pressure is so much.
Yes.
But then practice and more practice and more practice makes you perfect.
And I
Right.
just wanted to add that it's a two-way street. It's not only the child. See, if the child has talent but the parent doesn't take the trouble to drop the child, see that the child practices, I'm telling you that child will not go very far.
Right.
So if there's a parent who is consistently behind the child, it will help your child to grow. And let me tell you that in this world of family confusion, in this world of all kinds of confusions, a lot of heartbreak, if you are disciplined in your music making and you're disciplined in your approach to music making, music can be so healing. Yes.
True. And that, I think, applies in the general sense. Parents need to play a more proactive role in their child's
Very
life,
much.
right? Not just in music, but in studies,
In
in their
everything.
everyday,
Yes.
growing period of the child. Give them more time, as they say.
Yes.
All right, so ma'am, that's all we had actually time for. How quickly this time has passed. We could go on, and there's so much more to learn from you, to understand, to know. But unfortunately, this is at the most we could do with you with this limited time. Thank you once again for giving us your time and telling us so much, and may you continue this journey, this musical journey, and this journey that you're doing with the young children, and continue to bring more accolades for yourself, for the state, for the nation on the whole.
Thank you.
And all
Thank
the
you
very
so
best.
much. Yes.
Well then, my dear viewers, that was Madam Pauline Warjri for you. I'm sure you have been invigorated and enjoyed this conversation as much as I did in this one-on-one conversation that we had. Thank you very much for joining us. And from the two of us, from this beautiful little cozy home of Ma'am Pauline Warjri, we take your leave. Until next time, it's bye-bye.